All right, so this is ScaleMate, and I finally replaced that icon for version 3, so let's see. Now, it pulls us up into, on a phone that there are 5 tabs there at the bottom, which you're probably used to if you know the typical tab interface. This is iOS 18, and on large devices, it now puts the tabs up at the top. But in any case, there are 5, and the main one is this. This is where all the action goes on. So this is the main screen. Let me just this off to the side. This is the main screen. And the essence of this thing, and how many of you have sort of explored this enough to have gotten to this point where the essence is the line of notes up on the top and the circle of notes in the middle, right? That's basically why I created this app. You'll see there's a ton of information, I mean, a ridiculous amount of information in it as well, which is probably why most of the people who have bought this buy it. But this is for me like the killer app of it. And the idea is this is a C major scale, and you can see up top the whole step, half step patterns, right? You see the C and the D. So let's see. I'm going to just put it into um, show screen touches. I'm gonna, this is a mode that's just for teachers. Oh, now you can see the tab bar on the bottom, right? So for some older operating systems like this, we have the tab bar. And I'm gonna show screen touches here just so you can follow along. So this up top, you see the whole step, half step patterns, right? And the typical major scale, we say whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. And if you were to see the last C that's over here, it would be a half step. Um, what you see below is very different, right? And this is the real interest here is that all the notes on the C major scale are adjacent on the circle of fifths, which is to say, if you start on an F and you go up a fifth 6 times, you'll come to 7 notes, and those notes make up the major scale. They also make up F Lydian. Let me just, oh, whoops. Okay. So if you see it this way, now it's the same notes, but now F is up on the top. It's double circled to show that it's the root. And you can see that now we've started on F and you go up a fifth, it's C, G, D, A, E, B. When you go up a fifth, you're getting to harmonically brighter, whoop, oh, darn. And now it's misoriented. All right, I'm just gonna restart this thing. Uh, it's a weird um, little glitch. Um, and so let's go back to F Lydian. Okay. Um, if on the major scale, if you go, just to be careful, I'm gonna put on orientation lock. Um, if you start at F and you go up a fifth, you go to C, G, D, A, E, B. And that's really why it's so meaningful to look at scales in this way, is because when you start at the root, you move chromatically and it's a random smorgasbord if you go to a super minor note and then a mildly major note and then a medium minor note and then a quite major note and then a very slightly dark note. It's sort of like a dartboard where 19 is right next to 2 or whatever. Um, but you look at the notes on the circle of fifths and harmonically they're beautifulully organized in that the notes as you progress this way get brighter and brighter, which is to say more and more major. the notes as you progress this way get darker and darker, which is to say more and more minor. We start with these perfect notes, which are kind of sort of agnostic with respect to what they convey, but then you get into here, you have the major third, the major seventh, eventually the sharp 11, even the sharp 15, if you've ever experimented with that. And if you go this way, you get to minor seven, minor third, and then these dark notes, the minor six, the minor two, finally the flat five, and the super dark notes. And just by looking at this F Lydian scale, if you were to look at it this way up top, you can't really know all that much about it, except that it might be a mode. It's probably a mode of either the major scale or the melodic scale. Why? Because you can see up top that all the intervals are whole steps and half steps, right? And that's something that we like for for melodic purposes, because we like to make melodies with scales where we can go up and down kind of fluidly. And by going up in whole steps and half steps, it avoids the weirdnesses of certain scales like, harmonic major or harmonic minor, where we have these minor thirds next to half steps, and it sounds kind of exotic. So anyhow, but so you can tell a little bit up top, but down here, but you have no idea, looking up top, is this a major scale? Is it a minor scale? Is it a dominant scale? Is it a symmetric scale? Is it what qualities does it have? Is it really bright? Is it dark? Is it eerie? Whereas all those things jump out to you if you look at the notes, and in this case, all the notes of the scale are circled here. If you look at a scale on the circle of fifths, it tells you, is this thing bright? Is this thing dark? So for instance, if I double tap the B, we're going to go to the mode of this scale that starts on the B. Anyone know what mode that is? So remember, this is a C major scale, and we started on B, which is the seventh note.
B Locrian.
It's B Locrian, exactly. Is Locrian a major scale or a minor scale?
Locrian is a minor scale.
Exactly. Not only is the minor scale, but it's the most minor scale, right? It has the most flatted notes. It's the only one that has a flat five in the major scale. And so we do that. We do that by double tapping B. Mode change. It says mode change, 6 modes darker. That I just coded that up in the past half hour, actually. The reason being that in the latest version, you see these buttons down here. We have an undo and a redo button. So if I undo it, then it will tell me once again. Actually, I have to modify that, but it tells me what's going on. So now we have this really dark scale, B Locrian, and relative to F, all the notes were clockwise on the bright side of F. But now all the notes are on the dark side relative to B, because B is the brightest note. Like you go all the way to the east side of this nation to, DC or Bangor, Maine or something, and the rest of the nation is all west, right? That's what it's like when you're all the way east. And same thing with bright and dark. B is a very bright note in the key. If you take it as your root, as your reference point, then all the other notes are super dark. And you can hit play. And of course, oh, I'm in pointer mode. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Good, 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 good. Right? That sounds so dark. It sounds like really strange and ominous and mysterious. Right. And that's because all these notes in the scale are counterclockwise on the circle of fifths from the root. That is, rather than being brighter going up fifths, we've generated them by going up fourths or down fifths, and they become these dark minor nodes. notes. You can't really see that up top clearly. All you see is the same sort of nicely spaced out structure that you saw before. If you look carefully, this is the root. It has now the flat second, the flat third, the four, the flat five, the flat six, the flat seven. Everything is flattened here. Um, so, if you inspect it that way, you can see, oh, this is really minor. But here you just see it all at once in one gestalt because everything's on the left side. Um, uh, Now, we're mostly used to seeing C at the top of the circle of fifths, right? Um, and we can still show it that way. That's what this thing down here is for. This button that now has a 1, what that means is that the root is up top, okay, of the circle of fifths. But if I hit that button, it reorients the circle of fifths so that C is up top. The advantage of that is that we see it in our usual location with all the notes in their usual place. The disadvantage is that when we had it the other way, with the root up top, all the cast of characters, all the other notes, are sitting in their position according to their role. And what I mean by that is that in the key of B, the major third is over here. The major third is always going to be over there relative to the note up top. Likewise, the minor third is over here. It's always going to be there, right? In other words, the note in this position is always going to be the major 7, a really bright note. Here is always going to be the minor 6, the really dark note, and so on. So that, well, let's go into, say, Dorian here, where we have notes on either side. We can see that in a sense, we've gotten rid of these super dark notes and replaced them with some not as dark notes over here, right? And we can sort of do that manually if we want. We could just let's if you can program all the effects of all the different gestures, but the default is that if you hold down a note, it adds it or removes it. So here we've removed B. Now up top, it's a little flummoxed because it doesn't know, it's a 6-note scale that it knows is minor because it has a minor third, but it's not a conventional scale. Otherwise, it auto-identifies scales. But now if we replace the B with a B flat, now we've got Aeolian, right? And another way to look at that is that we just sort of shifted, we had Dorian here, we have Aeolian
I have a
here.
question. Or
Yeah,
a comment, Anton, since this is informal. Can you go back to that last mode that you just had orientation where you had just the 6 notes?
yeah.
I was just thinking, and I don't know if this is programmably possible or anything, but when I see unknown, but my eyes see 2 triad pairs there. That would be kind of cool to know that you you
Bless your
just
heart. I have considered triad pairs.
okay.
And yeah, so triad pairs are a particular way of organizing tonality that's a little different from conventional scales because what triad pairs are, if you haven't seen it, is it's a way of designating, okay, I'm going to not use a pentatonic scale or a heptatonic scale, a 7-note uh, scale. I'm going to use a hexatonic scale, like the whole tone scale has 6 notes, so that we call that hexatonic. I'm going to use a 6-note scale, but what's special about it is it's made up of 3 triads. Okay.
Yeah.
So for instance, this what are the 3 triads that you see here?
So I see C major and D minor.
Okay.
So now, and I've been really deep diving into triad pairs for about the last better part of the year, lots of permutations, and I just get a lot of melodic mileage, I would say, uh, that is certainly applicable over multiple chord types, you know. But and
Mhm.
I'm just thinking that there's another resource this app could deliver.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't explored that. When I do, it will be sort of the same way as diminished, in that if you go to a diminished scale, let's go there for just one sec. There's two ways of selecting scales. You can either use this drop down and it lets you choose them right here on the screen, or you can now go to this new scales tab and it just shows you all the possible scales and you can filter it as you like by various things. Um, you can look at only the most important scales, or you can, in this case, let's look at just 6-note scales. Now, right now, it only has these. If you look at sort of the whole tone scale, oh, well, it brings up uh, a whole, what would you call this? Wikipedia entry,
Wikia,
except this is
yeah.
all my doing. But let's just say use this scale, and then it'll bring up the D whole tone scale, right? You'd see uh, it has 6 notes. Let's take a different scale, get rid of this constraint, and let's look at a diminished scale and use that. Now, the interesting thing about the diminished scale here is that I color them. You can turn this on or off in settings. Um, where is it? Oh, diminished coloring over here is auto, so that it shows diminished coloring whenever you're looking at a diminished scale, and it doesn't when you're not. This is a little advanced, but in a nutshell, every diminished scale is the conjunction of two diminished 7 chords. So the blue notes, which are at 12 and 3 and 6 and 9 o'clock, form a D or a B or an A flat or an F diminished 7th chord. That's because of this beautiful symmetry in diminished land. And likewise, the A form another chord, and you take sorry, if you look at the red, that forms another diminished 7th chord, and you take blue and red together, that's a scale. You take blue and green together, that's a scale, and so on. So we could do the same with triad pairs, which would be interesting. And I've been sort of queuing that
Yeah.
up.
And
Um,
and and even in that one right there, if this programming for triad pairs, certainly we have the chords here. We have the 4-part chords
mhm.
um, indicated by the colors, but then we've got look at all the triad pairs we have inside that scale too.
Yeah, and what's
Major,
cool
minor.
is there's two. You could also see this as two major triads, right? This is both a D major triad, right? Well, there's four
Well, it's
major
four.
triads in here.
Four major and four minor triads.
Yes.
That would be cool to see that like somewhere in the interface.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets a little tricky. And one lesson that I've learned about building apps is that don't include anything that is not going to be really intuitive and clear and bug-free. Because if you do it because someone requested it and you're trying to help them and so on, and it's not super clear, you're going to get dinged for it. I mean, in other words, like if I take the same app and it's getting, whatever, 4.8 on the App Store, and I add triad pairs and it's a little confusing, my rating is going to go down. Right. So, it's a funny thing that they'd rather you not include a feature than include it half baked. Um, so
Oh,
anyhow,
that's a concern for your shareholders
yes.
and not your power users.
Unfortunately, I'm a shareholder. I want this thing to thrive. I don't want to have lots of negative comments on it so that, because really, I mean, heck, if I can make money off of this, great. But I'll tell you what, the time that goes into this is not worth the money in any sense. It would be wonderful if it's worth it someday. But I just love sort of propagating these ideas and fostering interesting discussions. And the big thing is using it for myself in my teaching and with my students is because this is what I want to. So anyhow, but if we go back for a second, let's go back. In fact, let's just do it one by one. We can transform this scale by getting rid of all these, right? Let's go back to and adding the ones that are back. Now we've got D Dorian. And what did I get rid of? I got rid of the B in D Dorian, right? And now we have a C major scale, a C major arpeggio, excuse me, a C major triad and a D minor triad. And let's get rid of the D minor triad, or let's get rid of the C major triad, okay? The C, the E, and the G. And now it'll identify this, if you see up top, as a D minor triad, right? And you can see the shape of the D minor triad. And that leaves the shape of the C major triad, which is C and E and G. And by the way, you can put on the piano thing. Do you see this thing go animate on and off down at the bottom when I touch? Well, if you hit the piano keyboard, so now you can do and hear the D minor triad and now the C major triad, right? So you can experiment that way. And in fact, so now we're just making random melodies of using the scale, which is just a 3-note scale, right? And if we want, we could play along with it. Like, for instance, if you want to hear what a 6 sounds like in the context of all this minorness, you can hear ba, right? And so on. So yeah, it auto-identifies all these things, but it does not auto-identify hexatonic subsets of major and minor scales at this point. But it's on my list. I kid you not. I have a long list, right? So thank you for bringing that up. It'll sort of bump it up in my head. Anyhow, so the fun thing here is that first of all, let me just show you. That is really weird. I'm sorry. All right. Discovered a little bug. I don't have information about simple triads. So when it looked for information, it didn't find it. But yeah, okay. But it was still showing the diminished business up top. All right. What was I gonna say? Oh, so let me just go through the tabs, okay, for a second. Some of these are pretty straightforward. So to try just gives a list of different things that you can try. Like, if you tap the books below, it'll allow you to go through the list of important scales, right? So tap it. If you tap the settings, you can customize the settings. And so on. And it remembers what of these that you've done, and you can reset, and it just gives you it's a way of sort of showing someone what the app can do, and it badges, that's the verb for app, iOS. Whoops. Oh, what happened? Crud. All right, let's go back. For iOS geeks, it badges the number of suggestions that are there for you to try. So that's just a way of me encouraging people to explore the app. The main view is the one you know. The settings view, it lets you set things about, am I going to show double accidentals? Am I going to, do I want to see the note rolls in solfege, for instance? and now instead of showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, excuse me, 1, 5, uh, 2, 6, 3, and 4, -7, -3, it shows me the equivalent solfege, right? If you've done solfege. And so there's all kinds of settings like that that affect how fast things play, blah, blah, blah. Transposition so that if you're a sax or trumpet player, you can play along with it and it does it in your key. So you can see there's all kinds of settings. About just tells you there's a sort of a tutorial here that welcomes you, tells you the various things you can do. It's good to explore, tells you, if you're a read the manual type, you read this at the beginning. And if you're not, then it's there when you need it. And it'll also, right, there, blah, blah, blah. Lots of stuff that's pretty clear there. If you want to contact me, you can send me an email. And message canceled. Let's see. But the main is where everything goes on. And that leaves just the scales, which is new, right? I didn't have this in version 2. You could only do it this way, and I'll show you. Let's go here and let's just take a 7-note scale. Let's look at the melodic minor scale. So if you hit this cap up here, it'll take you to the melodic minor scale where you see all the write-up of it, including the various melodic minor modes. Whenever you see something blue, you can link to it. So it's like, all right, looking at the melodic minor here, like the major scale, it's used as a source scale to generate 7 unique modes. And I haven't heard of Lydian dominant. I mean, I've heard of Lydian dominant, but what's that? So you tap it and it takes you there, right? And it tells you about it, about how it's the tritone substitution of the altered scale. You can rabbit hole to the altered scale, gives you other names, gives you tips, and so on. So there is a ton of information here. And if you disagree with anyone, with any of it, you know the guy who wrote it. So drop me an email. And if you go back, it eventually takes you all the way back to where you started. The interesting thing also now, so these are all the scales I have them in here. And if you just want to filter out the most common ones, here's what I list as the top 10. Your top 10 may differ, but it's just to give a sense so it's not quite as overwhelming, right? You can get rid of that and add another filter for importance top 20, right? Here's what I think of as the top 20 most important scales, or you can get rid of that and just look at them all. And you'll see there's some like, what the heck is in-sen? Well, in-sen is a really interesting and important scale. It happens to be the scale that you would use over a sus-flat 9 chord, but it has all these cool modes that you can use really effectively over melodic minor. And so can learn about that. It shows you, well, we switched to solfege, so it shows you the notes here in solfege. Let's switch back because maybe you guys don't know solfege. Numbers are a little bit more transparent. Let's go back. Now it shows you in the numbers, it contains the 1, the 2, the 4, the 5, and the minor 7, just like a sus pentatonic, except the 2 is flattened, right? So it shows you that in the key of C. If you want, anything blue, you can tab. And so you can see it now in the key of E if you want, right? E, F, A, B, D. Whatever key it'll show you there. You can use this scale if you want, and it'll pull it up. It says we switched from melodic minor to in-sen, right? You can see that this is an exotic scale because it's got these 4 things over here, and then it's got this one weird note, right? And if you play it, you hear the exoticism. You hear what I mean? Uh, if we put it to scale, here's the scale. Insen is the Japanese name for it. Different countries have different names. Ours doesn't because it's not a common sound here, but it is used around the world, and you can hear sort of ba da ba da 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 do da, right? The sort of Asian or Eastern feel to it. And what's cool is it's got all these other important modes to it as well. Um, so I could talk you to death, but this one in particular is is the one that tells you why it's so important for if you listen to this. This is a subset of the melodic minor. That's a really interesting pentatonic scale, and the modes of this scale give you all the modes of the melodic minor scale. All right, I'll stop yapping about that, but there's a lot to explore, and you can always, go here and listen to it and look at it. Um, if I were to add to this the 4 and the major 7, now you see I have a C melodic minor scale, right? So it's a subset of the melodic minor scale that doesn't have the 4 and the major 7, but it does have the 6, which is really interesting and important because that's a very bright note. And it gives you a tritone from the minor third. Anything diametrically opposite, any two notes diametrically opposite on the circle of fifths form a tritone, right? Opposite ends of the harmonic universe. So you can see that, let's bring it back to the C minor 6/9 pentatonic, which is a mode of the D Insen scale. You can see right away a couple of things about it. Number one, it's minor. Whoops, crap, I forgot. Sorry. Let's transpose back. This little finger down here lets me deactivate everything so I can just point wherever I want. So you can see right away that it's a minor scale because this is the minor third. So all you ever have to do when you're looking at a scale this way is look in this position, assuming that it's set up with the root up at the top. All you have to do is look at this position, and if that's included, then it's got a minor third. Likewise, if this is included, it's got a major third. This doesn't have a major third, has minor third. We know this is minor. But there's something interesting about it, which is that it has this tritone pair here. And the thing about our conventional pentatonic scales is that they don't have any tritones. So let's go back to this. Whoops. This is the mode that we came from. No, sorry. This is the mode that we came from. The D Insen scale. Now, this has a flat 2. If we make it a natural 2, and you can see the flat 2 up here instead of the natural 2, and you can see the flat 2 over here instead of the natural 2, right? Up here, it's just a half step away from the note that we would want. But here, we see what a big difference it makes harmonically, right? It's way the heck in the hinterlands, as opposed to if we put it over here, if we get rid of this note, put it over here. Oh, darn, I'm sorry, I missed. Let's undo that. All right, if we activate this E, then we have the sus pentatonic, which is a mode of the major scale. It sounds like this. It sounds kind of like the other one, except we've gotten rid of the Eastern feel, right? Let's put it back. Right, here's the flat 2. Here's without either of them. Oh, I forgot to put on piano mode, sorry. If I put on piano mode, I can play along. There's the natural 2. There's the flat 2. Right? So you can hear the difference. Now let's go back here again. It lacks the exoticism. Why? Well, I don't know why, but you can see how it lacks the exoticism because all the notes are together on the circle of fifths. And because they're all together and there's only 5 notes, there's no tritones. Because for tritones, you need 7 notes if they're all adjacent. Because otherwise, you can only span, what, 4 hours, not 6 hours on the circle.
Anton, can you test something for me with this?
Yeah.
I like how this, first of all, I really like the real-time adding and playing, that this thing is playing and you can click and hear instantly. Like you don't have to go through menus or so.
Exactly.
Kudos on that. But with this pentatonic, with D in the center on either side and hearing that scale as you're playing, could you do me a favor and play? I would like to hear 3 tonalities. This one, C as the root and E as the root.
Okay.
I want to hear if I'm because this is a great ear training tool. I'm sensing in terms of dark, bright, and that's
Yeah.
these colors. Let me hear if what I'm thinking is really going to be what I hear.
Cool. So with C in the root, it's a scale you'll recognize. With E in the root, it is not, but it is a scale that will make a lot of sense to you, and we'll see that. And it's very close to another scale you'll recognize. So with C in the root, what is this? Oh, hey. So one of the settings is for education.
Well, okay. So if you could just play what you just did, but don't tell us anything.
So you see what I just did is there's a mode, hide and reveal the scale name. Okay.
Nice. Okay.
So now it's not going to auto-identify for you until you touch up top.
Yeah, I like that.
So let's put C in the root. So it's telling us we changed the mode to make it 2 notches brighter.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not telling us the mode.
Fair enough.
So what are the notes? Well, it's C, and you go up a fifth and another fifth and another fifth and another fifth, right? So it's C and the next 4 brighter notes. And play it. And now, that may sound familiar.
Can you just, before we identify anything, let it roll and show me that real-time playing where you go between C, D, and E.
Okay, cool.
Just let it roll.
This is decidedly major, right? We can all hear that. And it also makes sense because we see this E over here. It's the major.
But I just want to hear it without being intellectually aware.
I'll shut up. All right. Now we're going to change modes to the E, okay? Or would you rather go to D first?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Here's E. Okay, and now here's D. Right, and you can hear it's the same notes either way. All we've done is recontextualize them. In 2 ways. We put the root as the first note in the scale that's on the downbeat, and we have it playing constantly down low in the background. All right, so let's do that again, okay? We're going to go to the C mode. And now to the D mode. And now to the E mode.
Okay, so my observation now, my observation just in not knowing intellectually, names of things or that this is darker or brighter. I'm just hearing that E1 as actually brighter, but maybe it's because it's in the context of the other ones. I was kind of hoping I would hear this dark, ultimate darkness between these five notes and C as the ultimate brightness.
Yeah.
D somewhere in the middle. And I'm wondering what I'm hearing in terms
I'll tell you my guess as to what you're hearing.
okay.
Because of chromatic issues that have nothing to do with harmony, but have to do with the upper view up here, E is a higher note. It means that the range of notes is higher. And it's easy to confuse uh, high pitch with brightness, right? In ear training, that's a common thing, is that higher sounds sound more major at first and darker ones sound more minor. And I think that's what's going on. Let's do an experiment, okay? So if I long press this, let's have it do random melodies instead of, and right? So that way the ranges will be more mixed up. And let's see if that changes it. So here's, let's start with C. And now I'm going to switch to E.
Yeah, that helps. I kind of wish you didn't tell me though what the roots were. So can we switch keys? Let's have a fun little experiment here.
Okay.
Switch the key, go F sharp or whatever you want, and do the same thing, but don't tell me. And I like that different melodic pattern idea. And then switch them up, but don't tell. I don't want to look, and I want to hear if I feel the dark, because I did hear the darker with that one.
Cool. I'm glad. I did too. And I really appreciate your point. So let's see. How about D sharp? And you know, the funny thing is, okay, here we are in D sharp. Who the heck wants to be in D sharp? How do we get out of here? It's like the Jetsons. Like, Jane, how do you stop this crazy thing? How do we get out of D sharp? If you tap D sharp, normally if you tap something once, it transposes to that key. If you do that to the root, look what happens. It changes to the enharmonic key, right? And it also goes bling to highlight all the notes that have changed. So if we go back and forth, you can see the notes that are changing between sharps and flats. And it knows how to spell everything correctly. All right. So yeah, whatever. You don't have to look. I'm going to play one of these, and I won't tell you if it's bright or dark. And let's see. So here's one. And now I'm gonna change modes. And I'm going to change back to the first one again.
Okay.
Right?
My guess is that the first one was dark, the next one was bright.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, can you throw in the third one?
Yeah, sure.
The one that was equidistant.
Yeah. So
Okay.
here's the dark one.
Well, don't tell me.
Sorry. It was the same as the last one. All right. So here's a different one. And for those of you who are looking, I'm going to have it auto-identify up top. Okay? So now you can see what scale this is. And now I'm going to switch again.
That's middle.
I'm going to switch again now.
That's the middle one.
This is the middle one. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's harmonically nondescript.
Yeah.
In that it is neither major nor minor. It has the perfect intervals and the next closest thing. That's the floaty quality of sus chords. And this I call the sus pentatonic chord. And if you look at it, say in an easier key like C, you can see it has the perfect notes and the 2 and the minor 7, right? So this is a voicing of a sus9 chord. Right? A very important chord. I mean, and so this lets you experience not only the modes of the major scale, not only the modes of melodic minor scale, but the modes of the pentatonic scale, which are very important. And the one that we didn't capture is the second darkest one. And guess what that is? What is this? Well, in terms of familiarity, it's probably easiest to look up.
That's minor pentatonic.
Yeah, you can see it has the root, the minor third, the fourth, the fifth, the minor seventh, right? And how is this different from the other one that you were looking at? You were looking at the darkest mode of the pentatonic, which if I were to call it something, I would call it, in fact, I think I may give it this name as the Aeolian pentatonic. Why? Because instead of a fifth, because really, who needs a 5? It has a flat 6, characteristic of Aeolian.
Fair enough.
Right, so it's a little darker than the normal minor pentatonic. Oh, here's the other thing. Check it out. So if we go back, we've got here G minor pentatonic. What happens if we add this note? What's this?
Blues scale.
It's a blues scale. Right. And not for nothing, but have you seen this scale? Super important scale.
Yeah, that is
So what I would
that is the Dorian.
Well, check it out. What I would do is first identify the notes that are bunched together. Whoops. Oh, crud. Sorry. At least now I have an undo button. So, okay.
So it's a mode of the G melodic minor, a G blues scale. Well, you took it away.
It is, right. So this is just a pentatonic scale. Right. Okay. So now, but if we add another note, if we add a minor third to the major pentatonic scale, we have the major blues scale, right? And that's a staple of gospel, right? When you're hearing stuff like, can you let me wait? Do I have to? How do I put on? I can't. You can't hear that, can you?
We can hear it.
This? It sounds reasonable.
It kind of cuts out though.
Yeah, that's because I have original sound. All right, I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 second and put on original sound for musicians. Okay, now you can hear that better?
Yep.
Okay, right. So that's a G blues scale, right? But play the same notes. That's a G major blues scale. And it has that same bluesiness without the downcastness. So, you use a lot in upbeat, down to earth. It has the down to earth quality of the blues without the minor quality. So it's great for gospel or just, a great scale to use if you want to get bluesy over a major chord on a jazz tune. And so on. So, you see these relationships of all these things that you already knew, um, and how you can repurpose things. This is for guitarists, it's very familiar because guitarists tend to deal in shapes the way other instruments don't as much, right? Because you can just move along the fretboard to transpose, whereas you can't do that on piano or other instruments. Um, so you can see how the same things. Here's another example. All right, let's go back to the minor blues scale. Excuse me, I'm going to share again. Oh, and by the way, we've maybe what we should do first is just open it up to other people because Jeff and I have been monopolizing it, and thank you, Jeff. These are great questions. But I do want to open it up to others because these are probably on the more advanced side of things, right? And this is where, just like anything, the more you know about a field of study, the bigger the perimeter gets. So in a sense, there's more you can do with really advanced ideas with this app than there is with more basic ideas. But what you can do with the more basic ideas with this app is more important. It's really fundamental. Like the modes of the major scale, the major and minor pentatonic scale, things like that. It gives you a really firm view of how do these modes interact and so on. So I want to dial back for a second, and then if you want, I'm happy to hang out a little longer, and we can talk about some interesting things. For instance, what I call phantom modes and rootless scales, which are in terms of guitar. If you would say use D major pentatonic over C, and you'll get a bright Lydian sound. That's what I'm talking about, and you can see how that works on the screen. But first, let's go back, and I just want to let's put on auto identification again, and I just want to sort of reinforce that we've got a major pentatonic scale here. Let's move it to C, so it's really easy. You notice that there's no tritones in this scale at all, because they're all clustered together on one side. So there's, nothing has its antipode. I guess that's the word for the place on the opposite end of the circle. None of the notes in the scale have their tritone. So there's no tritones here. The major scale has one tritone. What is the major scale? Well, it's what happens when you take a major pentatonic scale and you add one brighter note and one darker note. And let's look at that visibly, right? What's a brighter note? Well, the major seventh. And what's a darker note? F.
Anton,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you think you're displaying your screen, but
Oh, crud. Thank you so much. Yeah, here I am blithely going on. All right. Bless your heart. What would I do without you? All right.
you'd get along very well.
No, I wouldn't. I'd be talking to the wind. The wind doesn't disagree with anything I say, but it doesn't have any interesting questions. So that's a loss for me.
I was thinking song lyrics.
I'd get along without you very well. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Let's see. All right. Let's see. So I just to back up a second, I will remove the F, remove the B. Now we have a C major pentatonic, you see up top, right? And what I was saying and not demonstrating, even though I thought I was first you add the major seventh, you add the B, and then you add the dark note, the 4. So you take the major pentatonic scale and you add one more dark note and one more bright note, and you have a C major scale, right? And then you can see, well, what if I take this brightest note and get rid of it and put one on the dark side, right? So in other words, what does that mean? Well, it means taking this B over here and, whoops, and getting rid of that and adding a B flat. Oh, this is interesting, right? So what did we learn? We learned that converting a bright note to a dark note means flattening that note, right? If you flatten the brightest note of a scale and if it's in the major scale, you add a new darkest note. Ah, interesting, right? Well, how do we know that's flattening? Because flattening is a 5-hour relationship on the circle of fifths, right? Half steps are always 5 hours apart. B and C, B and B flat, right? If you look at C, the major seventh is here, the minor second is here, right? So a half step down is 5 hours darker. So we take the B, we convert it into a B flat, like so. Get rid of this, add it, and I'm just doing this with my
Anton,
finger.
let me just ask you on that last comment. B to B flat is 5. Do you say degrees? What's the term you used? 5.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're totally right. Thank you for catching that.
Okay.
Right.
What did you mean? What did you mean to say?
I meant to say, thank you, that it's actually, well, it's confusing. It's 7 degrees darker is what it is, which is very strange, right? Because it's more than 6. But what it means is that it's going to the opposite end and then even going one further. So in the case of a major scale, you have to move it darker 7 notes to move it past all the notes in the scale. That's a little confusing concept, but what you can see here is that that if you take the B, you flatten it, you put it at the other end. In the pentatonic world, it's the opposite. Well, we just saw that a second ago. I'm not going to belabor that. But the key thing is that let's undo this, we have a C major scale. We take the B and we flatten it by getting rid of the B and adding a B flat. And what do we have? A C Mixolydian scale. And if we do that again and flatten the third, we now have a C Dorian scale. You could go on. Dorian looks interesting, right? It has 3 bright notes and 3 dark notes. It's symmetrical, both in that you can reflect it around the root on the circle of fifths, and it's symmetrical this way. Its intervals are the same upward and downward. So you can see all kinds of interesting things, and that's not as useful as this other stuff, but it's very interesting, and does have interesting consequences now and then when you're looking at voicings. But the point is this: is that now we have a Dorian scale that is a mode of B flat major, right? So another way to get Dorian is like this. Let's start at C major. And if we want C Dorian, what are we going to do? Well, let's first go to the Dorian mode of C, which is D Dorian, and now we can transpose it to C. And we have C Dorian. We want to take it back to major. We can go from this Dorian mode. We change the mode to a major mode, and transpose back to C, and we have C major, right? And that is the equivalent of flattening or sharpening two notes. If we take these two notes, whoops, if we take these two notes and we flatten them, we get these two notes. So we take the third and the seventh of a major scale and we flatten them. You can see how we get Dorian, right? We take these two bright notes, we substitute them with two dark notes, and what do we have? What do we wind up with? Well, if you were to just go to and specify Dorian over here, boom, you can see it right in front of you. And this is the really key thing, the key insight. We think of modes as, major, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. Those are the 7 modes, like the first mode, second mode, third mode, fourth mode, and so on of the major scale. They're important, but that way makes no sense, right? Because it's kind of crazy mix and match. Whereas if you order them as in this way, as first the brightest mode, Lydian, and then what are we going to do? We're going to flatten the sharp 11. Lydian has this bright sharp 4 or sharp 11. We're going to flatten that by replacing it with the 4. And what do we have? We have major. Then we take this major 7, we flatten that, becomes a minor 7. We have Mixolydian. We flatten the 3. We have Dorian. If we flatten now the 6, right? A is the 6. If you take a Dorian scale and you flatten the 6th, what do you have? Well, now you have Aeolian. And we can see that this way. It's Aeolian. The next darker is going to be Phrygian. And then finally, Locrian is the darkest. And you can see it's funny that the darkest note of Locrian is the flat 5, right? It's the same note as the sharp 11 if we were in A Lydian here. Let's just go directly to Lydian, right? The E flat, which was the flat 5, is the dark name of the D sharp, which is the sharp 11. It's the brightest note here. All right. Anyhow, that's a lot of talk. I don't know how much of this is helpful. I would love to hear questions. If anyone other than Jeff, I mean, obviously no disrespect to Jeff because I'm having a blast talking with you, but I would like to have a blast talking with other people too. Ron.
Anton, yeah. This has been very helpful for me. I'm unless I've got an instructor in front of me, I'm terrible at learning stuff on my own, even though I've been playing saxophone since they're made out of stone. And that's been my problem. I do most everything by. I mean, this is one of my favorite books here, Yusuf Lateef. You can't see it right there.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
It's one of my favorite books, and it's helped my ear training so much, and my soloing has improved so much because of that. But I don't know what the hell I'm doing as far as being literate. I know I start on the 5th or the 6th of the scale most of the time or the chord when I'm soloing. But when I write my own lead sheets out of my own individual music, and I try to put chords to it, when I hand it to a piano player, they say, "Why the hell did you name it that?" It's because I don't know any better. Is there something in this that will tell me when I'm playing 5 notes or something what chord that is?
Yeah, and I just want to say, Jeff put in comments repository of scales, and yeah, I think that's the one. I forget the name, but Yusuf Lateef has a book that Coltrane referred to a lot. I can't remember the exact name, but
that's it. Yeah, it's the repository of scales and melodic patterns.
Green Book, I think. Okay. And also, yeah, now I see, Jeff, that you actually told me that I wasn't sharing. You just did so very respectively in the chat, and I didn't see that at the time. So yes, so let's look at that, and to do that, let's look in here in scales. Now, the there's all these freaking scales here, right? But the nice thing is that if you're in a basic scale here, oh, Lydian, I want to know about Lydian. All right, all you have to do is hit this little graduation cap up here, and it'll bring you right to Lydian in the scale repository. So it'll tell you it tells you how to pronounce it. Fourth mode of the major scale, the brightest, most major of all the major scale modes. It's the equivalent to a major scale with its fourth raised, right? So it tries to talk about Lydian in terms that will make sense to someone who hasn't seen it yet, but who has seen things leading up to Lydian. It gives a sense of what it sounds like, just to kind of give your ears a little help. Well, communicating what they're hearing to the mind so that the mind can remember it and associate it with other mental phenomena. And then use it over a major 7 sharp 11 chord. So if you see a major 7 sharp 11 chord, that means Lydian, right? There's only one scale you can use for that, unless you're sort of going off script. And that's the Lydian scale, or over any other major chord which you want to give this particular sound. So if you see a major 7 chord, and you want to make it feel particularly ethereal and whatever, then you can play Lydian over it, and that's fine. So I try to discuss notation here as well. It's not the focus of what I'm doing, but in terms of tips, like if we go back to major, and we look at the different modes, it will in general, if we look at Dorian, Dorian is used as the first chord of the ubiquitous 2-5-1 progression. It's widely used over minor 7 chords as well as minor 9 and minor 11, right? So in that sense, it does specify that for all the scales that you look at. Like if we go back to the beginning and we look at in sen, right? What the heck is that? That's that Asian pentatonic scale. It's equivalent to a sus pentatonic scale with its second note lowered. So unsurprisingly, it works great over the sus flat 9 chord. Right? So you may not have seen that, but when you do, you can you know that you can use in sen. How about if you want to do it backwards? Like ask, all right, what scales will work over sus chords? Well, look in filters here, and one of them here is chord type. It lets you filter by, whoops, I'm sorry, I can't point here, but if you look at the second, it says chord type, scales you can use for a given chord type. And so currently, I just have 4 chord types. I could do it more specifically to different chords, but if we look over suspended chords, there aren't that many. And one of them is in sen. So basically, the criterion for what works over a sus chord is that we want it to have a 4, we want it to have a minor 7, and we don't want it to have a minor third. Because if it has a minor third, then it's basically just a minor chord with an 11. So in that sense, sus pentatonic works well, mixolydian works well, and these work well. Phrygian dominant and in sen will work really well over sus flat 9. The others, technically, they would work over sus chords, but they're going to be much more advanced. So, for instance, let's add another filter importance in, let's say, common scale. Okay, that rules out the other two. Okay, so now we're looking at common scales that can be used over suspended chords.
Okay, I understand that direction. I'm
Uh-huh.
looking for the other direction, I think.
Which
Just for
is,
it's just for to keep it simple. Just for instance, if I played on my piano C E G B flat, well, I know that's a C7, but how do I know that's a C7? If I changed it and used um, E G B flat C, what would I now call that chord?
an
That's
inversion
that's
of
what
a
my
C dominant chord.
Yeah, see, that's
Yeah,
what my problem is I can't recognize that in my brain for some reason or other. I know what chords are, I know what they sound like, I know the sound I want to put on the paper, but to name it,
right. Yeah. I feel you. And that's a really interesting question. Like, given four notes, what are they? Because they could be, and sometimes it's indeterminate. So, for instance, if you have a C, an E, a G, and an A, that could be a C6 chord, or it could be an inversion of an A minor seven.
which is my dilemma.
Yeah.
I mean, how do I decide what a piano player is going to like? I mean, it's the same damn notes,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
but they
And
want it called a different chord.
yeah. And unfortunately, that's the sort of thing that you kind of have to deal with on a case by case basis. Um, and uh, if you ever want to take a lesson, there's that option. I I almost never, put that option out there because I don't like, hawking my uh,
Why not?
but but I do think that the way to address what you're mentioning is either just to start from the beginning in a harmony class and it'll sort of cover all the areas, or to deal with them on a case by case basis and then you start to see the process.
Yeah.
Um, those are the two ways. And the second involves private lessons. And the first is just, uh, yeah, thanks for coming, by the way. Marcy's taken off. Yeah, it's been a while. It's almost an hour and a half already. So, yeah, the first is less expensive and more time consuming. So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, right? um, that's how it goes. And if you have any particular questions, just shoot me an email. Um, but other than that, it's just yeah. Um, you know, you want to ask yourself what is the bass playing, right? Because that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's where I try to go. Yeah.
And then you figure out all the other notes in relation to that bass note.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
reminder. All right.
Rick.
Yeah, I just like to thank you for a great app and a great presentation. Very informative. Yeah, it's going to help me a lot as a
Awesome.
as a second-rate drummer trying to become a fourth-rate pianist.